It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Dr. Matt Lucas, CEO and President of Our Daily Bread Ministries. Matt has served in Christian nonprofits for over 20 years, and his current leadership role at Our Daily Bread is a global Bible engagement ministry with a staff of 700 serving in 32 offices to distribute hundreds of millions of print and digital resources in 58 languages in more than 150 countries. Prior to Our Daily Bread, Matt served in Christian higher education at Provost at Corban University in Oregon and Chancellor at Indiana Wesleyan University. He writes for the company, speaks regularly, and works with churches around the world. In his spare time, Matt loves to hike with his wife, Tammy, and spend time with his 6 daughters and 3 grandchildren. Matt Lucas, welcome into the corner office.
Oh, thank you, Brent. Glad to be here.
Where does the podcast find you today?
Yeah, we're in Grand Rapids today. I'm usually traveling somewhere globally, but our U.S. office is here in Grand Rapids, where I usually find myself.
Summer has hit already. You getting those hot, humid days up in Michigan?
Yeah, we are. But, last couple of days has been unseasonably cool and even cold. So, but yeah, we are into summer.
Nice to hear. Well, we want to start our journey kind of where you got started, and we always like to talk a little bit about the early years. So tell us where you grew up and what your early family life looks like now.
Yeah, I've had an interesting early family life. My dad was in the Air Force, was an Air Force officer. So we traveled around the world, 3 to 4 years each location. So born in Louisiana, lived in Taiwan, Hawaii, Oklahoma, Ohio, and then ended up in the Northwest, Pacific Northwest, where both my parents' families are from. So we returned to their home, but it wasn't really my home. And after that, went off to college and other graduate school, staying primarily in the Pacific Northwest. Got 2 younger brothers. My parents came to know the Lord when I was a young boy in Taiwan, and so I remember that transition in their life. So I've been fortunate to grow up in a stable family. My parents are still married and love each other. So yeah, I've been blessed to have that type of upbringing.
Wonderful home life. And wow, it sounds like you're probably changing schools a lot, private and public schools in different locations around the world.
We had a couple private when I was in overseas, but primarily public. And yeah, it's tough when you change schools. You're always the new kid. And that created its own challenges that I think still sometimes affects me. I'm used to being in new environments, but I don't always like having to reintroduce myself each time. So,
right. But probably develop some of that cultural empathy, particularly living in Taiwan and some places that are very different culturally than the U.S.
Yeah, definitely. I think that I pull on that a lot in this role, given our global work. And I think about that a lot. I've been the minority many times in situations in different contexts. In Hawaii, even though it's a U.S. state, definitely being a white young male, I was the minority, even though living in the States gives you a majority culture feel. But also just dealing with the fact that a lot of Hawaiians aren't really sympathetic with the mainland. So I had to kind of navigate both of those issues, working in that environment or growing up in that environment.
It can be humbling.
Definitely, definitely.
And Dad was military, career military then?
Yeah, career Air Force officer.
Yeah,
So that brings its own unique perspective. I mean,
right.
you're definitely as an Air Force officer, as a child dependent of an Air Force officer, you give them some privileges on the base that others aren't given. Uh, but it was great growing up on bases. That early on, we left the base after a while, but that has its own unique environment as well.
Yeah, yeah. Because a little microcosm of a U.S. centric or military U.S. military centric, really. It's
Yes.
probably not very much an example of a U.S. city, but very, very. Were they the same as you went from military community to military community? Uh,
Yeah, there are some things that are similar. When you
yeah,
grow up in that, you just kind of get used to it. But
right,
the NCO, non-commissioned officers club, the officers club,
right.
navigating between those places you can go. I grew up, in a safe environment where, living in the home, since you're on base, we were given free reign. You
Yeah,
know, by the time we moved to Oklahoma, we moved off base. But up to that point, we were living either on a military compound or um, on the base. So, yeah, you're a lot safer, a lot more free to move around and do what you want to do and explore. So those were good memories early in my childhood.
I remember having some friends growing up in San Diego that's parents were, connected to either the Navy military base or, they were up in Pendleton, the Marine Corps, and those commissary privileges were very
Yes,
nice.
those are good privileges. Definitely, the cost is much cheaper. I missed those when I turned 18, and my dad still gets them as a retired officer.
Nice.
But yeah, we're not able to experience those anymore. But yeah, that's definitely a difference maker for sure.
Big benefit. Now, I'm sure your mom, as you moved around a lot, was busy with home life, but did she pick up a career at any point in time?
Yeah, she was a elementary school teacher. In fact,
Yeah,
she taught my fourth grade class, which was a experience of its own.
imagine.
Having your mom as your elementary school teacher. Um, but yeah, no, she did a great job. Early in my growing up years, she was at home, but as I got into well, really, she started teaching for the first time fourth grade, and I was her first group of students to go through her class. So uh, yeah, it was a good experience to have that. Looking back fondly now, at the time, it wasn't always a good experience.
I can imagine. I'm sure she was had to be a little bit extra hard on you than maybe some of the other students.
Yeah, my favorite story is I had 100% in social studies, and I was at home, and she was asking if I had done my extra credit news report, and I said, "Mom, I have 100%." And she said, "Do it anyway." So I was, so yeah, there was never a break.
No, I can imagine.
Yeah, your mom always knows what you have and have not done, and she did a good job of managing that for the most part. But yeah, there was a little bit of expectation for me to perform at a higher level.
Now, you mentioned that you grew up in a Christian home. Mom and dad had accepted the Lord when they were in Taiwan. Did you find that moving around from place to place that was difficult to maintain, or did it maybe bring you closer as a family, particularly when you lived in countries where Christianity maybe wasn't the dominant religion?
Yeah. No, I would say, my parents were intentional about that. They knew what life was like without being a follower of Jesus.
Yeah.
And so the first thing they did when we moved to a new place was to find a church.
Mm,
They were led to the Lord by Southern Baptist missionaries. So we started by always looking for a Southern Baptist church, not because we were necessarily thought that was the right one, but just that was their,
connection.
training.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, they did a great job of really being intentional about that. And I went on to go to a Christian university,
Mm,
and a lot of that was inculcated as far as growing up and wanting to develop a Christian worldview. And my mom, particularly, was intentional about that. As an educator, as you can imagine, that was high on her priority list. So, yeah, I was thankful for that. I'm glad to have had that type of experience and training as a young boy. And then, so I went to BSF and, in um, Southern Baptist circles, it's not Awana, but Royal Ambassadors.
right.
So I did all of the typical suburban kid experience going to church
Mm.
and all the extra VBS in the summer, church camp. My parents were intentional about creating
That
a
VBS is Vacation Bible School for our
yes
listeners who may
vacation.
not have
Yeah.
gotten
Yep. Good.
that.
Yep. Yep. So vacation Bible school, and then served in it, and so
Yeah,
did that
full
as well. So
circle.
did the whole circle. Yeah.
So, again, with the multiple locations, both domestically and internationally, were there some things that you recall that really inspired you during your childhood?
Yeah, I think two things. I grew up playing soccer, so
Mm.
you're living internationally and on bases where kids have lived internationally. So this is in the 70s, so soccer really isn't popular, but on the military bases, it
Yeah,
is played by everybody. And so grew up doing that. So that was very informative and transformative for me. Um, was able to play select soccer, traveled around the country, played at the university level. So those were good experiences. And so that having that was kind of a anchor wherever I went. There
sure.
was always a soccer team. And the other, probably the most interesting, as I look back, that all of my friends were people of color. I was usually the first friend I made, whichever new place we went. Probably some of that goes back to my time in Taiwan. Uh,
Right.
but even now, those are transformative. And all the places I went until we moved to the Pacific Northwest, where I went to a school which had very little minority population. It really was
I see.
non-existent. It was a
Yeah.
white, middle class neighborhood. All the other places, often there was a melting pot of a number of different ethnic groups and races. And yeah, my closest friends were um, either Korean, African American, Chinese, people with that background. And so that was really, yeah, you walk into those homes and it's different. I
Right.
didn't feel it was different at the time.
Yeah.
It just felt normal. Like this is just the environment that I lived in. But when I moved to Washington State, I missed it. It was hard to
Mm.
acclimate there, and realizing that I was in a very different mono, you know, monochromatic culture.
Right.
And so I missed that aspect. And so in this role now, where I get to travel internationally and be around a broad selection of people, is enjoyable. But so at the time, didn't really see that as important because, like I said, you just live in it. But now, yeah, it's very, very informative to who I
And foundational, it sounds like. Yeah.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
Again, getting that cultural empathy and that racial empathy as well. Awesome. And where did you finish up high school? Where was that?
So that was in Puyallup, Washington, so
Okay.
Rogers High School, and
Sure.
yeah, did that
The,
there.
the
Then
the location of the Washington State Fair. Don't ask me how I
yes,
know that.
yes, the Puyallup Fair, everyone knows that. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what they're known for there,
All right.
just outside of Tacoma, just south of Seattle. And then after that, went off to Corban University, where I did my undergraduate degree, which is in Salem, Oregon.
Yeah. Yeah. Fabulous. And what made you choose Corbin?
Yeah, my parents were both college graduates, and they never said that you will go to college, but all the stories they told and the conversations we had, I could tell that my trajectory would end up at a university. I never thought otherwise.
Right.
So selected Corban University, um, primarily because it was a Christian university.
Yeah.
My church was affiliated with it somewhat. Some friends had gone there. And I just had a sense that I wanted a strong foundation for my Christian faith. And I had never really gone to a Christian school growing up. Um, so, yeah, just wanting to have that kind of invested in me. And yeah, I was really fortunate to be able to go to Corban, where I played soccer, and really grew in my faith and grew in, yeah, who I was, my identity, like for most people when they experience university life. It's also where I met my wife. Um, and we got married the year before I graduated, so between my junior and senior year.
Yeah. Oregon's a great place to go to school. It was a decade or so before you, but I'm a graduate of the University of Oregon. So just down the road in Eugene
Yeah,
from Stanford.
no, yep. I'm a big Ducks fan. Yep.
Well, back in those days, it rained pretty much 9 months of the year, so there wasn't a whole lot of distractions. I think with global warming, it's probably not. It's a little warmer up there now these days, but
Yes, definitely.
I love that area, Mount Bachelor and the coastline, beautiful part of the country. And then you went to work for Corban as well. Now, was that before you received your doctorates or after, right? I think you came back to Corban as an employee later.
Yeah, I left in '94 as a student and went off to
Right,
do my master's in doctoral work at Idaho State University. And I then came back to the Salem area to teach high school.
right.
And after 6 years, Corban University, invited me back to start the first graduate program in education,
Yeah,
which really wasn't on my plan. I was planning to go back to teach university level English, which is where my doctorate's in. Um,
right.
but yeah, it was a great opportunity. Humbled that they invited me back, and really, you know, speaking by the corner office or into the corner office. That's where I was thrust into leadership for the
Yeah.
first time in a paid managerial way, and just kind of thrust into the deep end. Uh, so
When
that,
did you start? When did you start managing people? What job was that there at Corban?
well, I coached soccer for 4 years,
Right.
varsity level. So I mean, there's a lot of management that goes on in that experience. And so, but formally, it was right away. My first job was to be the graduate, the School of Education, at the School of Education, the director of the graduate program. So I started June 1st, and we had to get a program up and going by the end of August. And
Wow.
I had really no policies, no employees. I had to hire them, build it, create the courses, find the students. It was, I really, to be honest, Brent, I should never have been asked to take that role. They liked me because I was a known, they knew me.
No
I had my
names.
doctorate, and had been teaching high school English, so it was a quick solution for them. But yeah, it was a trial by fire. It was a tough experience. I learned a lot, loved it, um, but yeah, very difficult to just start off. So it was my first 10 years out of college, and I'm leading for the first time in a university setting.
Well, a very entrepreneurial. I mean, it was a startup, pretty much, right?
Yeah, no, it's a great way. And I think, as a young boy, I mean, I was always doing some type of business venture. So, and my
Right.
desire as a young boy was to be an entrepreneur, a successful business CEO, although I didn't know exactly what that meant, just this idea of running a business.
Right.
Um, but then I found my love in literature and thought that was probably not going to be where I would go, and really wanted to be a university English professor. So when I found myself back in this role of leading a program, my desire was to get out of it as quickly as possible. I was like, okay, I'll do this for 2 years. My goal is to get in the classroom. This is where my training is. This is where my passion is. But it was just a series of, as each step along the way, I found myself further and further removed. So
Yeah.
I had a great mentor, and I really felt like there was some innate leadership qualities that were just there, and really some administrative giftings that I wasn't really aware that I had. So it was very easy to do what I did. When I tell people who have been in education exactly what I experienced, that's not your typical experience, and they usually say that's crazy, and it really was. I would never do that to somebody, but
Well,
God knows that.
you've kind of gone full circle, and we want to get to ODB, our daily bread, in a minute. But I want to hear a little bit more because you'd mentioned the entrepreneurial activities. What type of things were you doing during your high school and even college years that were, prior to getting your love for literature?
Yeah, it was even going back to my elementary years. I was always
Mm,
selling things in the classroom, whether it was scratch and sniff stickers, or it was candy. I mean, it's just I had a lemonade stand. I had a lemonade stand that I had two of them at the same time that I was operating. I had a mobile lemonade stand to take around to people. Like I was, and then your typical, mowing lawns and washing cars and shoveling snow, just hustling to make
sure.
money. Um, so yeah, that was probably just part of who I was. Loved that idea of building something. Um,
But then you said you made that shift. So did that happen during your college years when you fell in love with English and literature? And if so, tell us a little bit about kind of that transition.
Well, at the same time, while that's happening, you're going to school and you're starting to discover your identity about what makes you click. And um, English grammar and English literature just felt natural. I had some really
Mm,
gifted teachers, um, really blessed. Going back to the sixth grade, that I can look back and pretty much every year had just very influential teachers. And so by the time I got to college, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. At first, I thought I might, I thought about business. And I thought maybe I wanted to be a pastor. Wasn't sure. But I walked into my first literature classroom and I had read most of the things that were being taught in the introduction to literature course, and it just felt natural.
wow.
I think I want to teach English literature, and I would
Yeah.
love to teach it at the university level. And so yeah, that just began this drive to pursue that, and just enjoyed it. And God was very gracious in giving me some great, mentors and professors at the university level, and had an earned teaching assistantship and a doctoral fellowship. So my graduate school was paid for, um, and it was given experience at the same time. So yeah, I just, success leads to more success, and
Right.
I was finding it in that area. And I thought really my goal was to be a college professor till I was 75. I figured if I could teach 50 years in the classroom, that would be success.
Yeah.
Which my dad, to be honest, he thought that was crazy because I grew up talking about being a CEO, business
Right.
entrepreneur all this time. He
Right.
says, like, who are
What
you?
happened to my son in
Yeah,
college?
we had a long conversation in college. He said, "Are you sure this is what you want to do? This is not.
Hmm.
Um, this isn't, the person that I saw raising up in my classroom. Not that he was opposed to me being an English teacher. He just
Sure.
was like, this just doesn't seem to be what you have aspired to, what you are passionate about. Um, so it's kind of interesting in my role now, and even in college when I was teaching at the university, working at the university, how those things came together in
Right.
a way that was very surprising. Um, in fact,
Right.
the irony, Brant, is that once I started at Corban University, I was teaching some courses, but I have never taught an English course as a full-time employee.
Hmm.
Um, I've done it at the high school level, and when in my master's and doctoral program, as a doctoral fellow, I was teaching, but I've never actually taught an English course at the university level, which
Well,
is,
it's
yeah.
so amazing what I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, yeah, it's just amazing. Like that was not, I don't know why that's happened that way, but
Yeah.
in the result.
Yeah. I was just going to comment on how literature, particularly American literature, can have such an impact on us. I recall when I was in 10th grade, I don't know why I remember the name of my English teacher, but Dr. Carey was just great. Very kick back. Of course, you read Moby Dick, right, in 10th grade and high school. At least they did back when I was going to high school. And I remember struggling through it, but eventually kind of enjoying it and did it to pass the grade and literally just picked it up again, met a friend locally and said, hey, he's English, hadn't read it before. I said, well, let's read this together and kind of do a book club. I have fallen in love with Melville, and
Mm.
it's just such a wonderful story. And it's inspired me to read more of some of that same period of American literature because there's so much. Because I remember reading Steinbeck when I was, in college, and there's just such a richness to it. And I could see how that could really capture your imagination as a young man in his 20s.
Yeah, I would. Well, if you love Melville, I would encourage you to read Twain, which would be the opposite end
Yeah,
of the spectrum.
yeah,
I'm a
right,
big Twain fan. It was
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
I look back on that in a lot of ways for leadership development. An English literature background, trains you to be a good writer, good communicator,
right,
good
right,
thinker, good reader.
yeah,
All those really translate to almost any role you can do, except for maybe
absolutely.
astrophysics. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that was
Absolutely.
good.
Communication's so important.
Yeah.
And so about 10 years, 10, 11 years at Corban, I think, right? And became a provost there. And did you at that time kind of think, well, this is my career and this is where I'll stay? And if it, well, it obviously wasn't. So tell us a little bit kind of about your transition. I know you had one step before you got to ODB, but sorry, yeah, to Our Daily Bread. But I'd love to just hear a little bit about how you kind of made that transition back to the business world, so to speak, even though it's obviously in nonprofits.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. So I was there for 13 years at Corban University.
Mm.
So for my first four, I started out as a director, and after 2 years became the dean, which I didn't want to be the dean. My mentor moved into the provost office and asked me to take the role, and it's a long story. I eventually did that, all the while trying to think how I get back to the classroom. Um, and then she left after my second 2 years as dean, and our president at the university at the time, his name was Reno Hoff, he had about 4 or 5 more years on his time as president, and he said, I don't want to do a search, and he invited me to apply for the role. Actually, didn't
Mm.
really apply; he just basically appointed me, which is very rare. I don't know why he did at the time. He must have saw something in me because I really didn't have much interaction with him. And so, yeah, after 4 years at the university, I'm 36 years old, about to turn 37, and I'm the provost, and I'm probably the second youngest person on faculty. And it was a incredible experience. I learned a lot. It was baptism by fire in a way that
Mm.
I still have my scars from some of the early mistakes. Fortunately, we had a good faculty that were patient with me, but they were also surprised. I mean, there was a little bit of like, really, this guy? I mean, he's not even, most of the faculty were much older than me. So,
Right.
so I did that for 9 years. Went from provost, then I became provost and executive vice president. Served under two presidents there, and really was enjoying my time there. We loved Oregon. My wife's from Oregon. All my girls, we have 6 girls. They're all from Oregon.
Wow.
Um, well, one's adopted from Africa, but she's grown up in Oregon. So
Hmm.
we felt comfortable there, and but yeah, I just felt like after a while that I needed to explore. I couldn't just do my entire career at Corban University, and so I applied for the role of chancellor at Indiana Wesleyan University.
Yeah.
And
Now, is that a Christian college as well?
yeah, it's the largest Christian university in the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, so very different than Corban. Um,
Yeah.
and as chancellor, I oversaw the online and adult degree completion and graduate programs. So there's about
Mm.
11,000 to 12,000 students there, 18 sites around this three-state region of Indiana, Kentucky, and Ohio. So, I mean, I went from a small 2,000 student
Yeah.
campus to, yeah, a much larger, much more complex organization, really a leader in higher education. And it was again, another baptism by fire. Learned a lot. I found myself, God is continually moving into these roles that I wasn't really looking for,
Right.
wasn't expecting. And as I stepped into them, just having to learn a whole different skill set. And yeah, so that's how I ended up at Indiana.
Yeah. Stretching your gifts and identifying new ones, I'm sure. And you spent the better part of 5 years there. And how big was the university?
So
About
about
10,000 students?
13,000 total,
Yeah.
11,000 on my side, 2,000 student,
Wow.
2,500 student campus. Then we had a small seminary. So yeah, we had about 100. About 250 million revenue a year. I was responsible for about 130 million.
Yeah.
So
Big
it was a
job.
big job, big jump from where I was.
Right.
But yeah, transformative for sure.
And you're coming up, I think, on 3 years now with Our Daily Bread. So tell us about that transition. How did that come along? And tell us about the organization, what you folks do, your mission.
So yeah, I started. Really, I was finishing my time at Indiana Wesleyan, and we are getting ready to do a presidential transition. And I knew I wasn't interested in being the president at Indiana Wesleyan, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. And I had several search firms reach out to me about president's jobs around the country. Um,
Were those all nonprofit or Christian organizations?
Yeah, they're all Christian universities. I mean,
Yeah.
I would have to apply for them, but I just didn't. They weren't interesting for me for a variety of reasons. But I just had a sense that God might be doing something different, and so
Mm.
a search firm reached out to me about this position at Our Daily Bread Ministries, and I really applied just to see what it would be like to actually make the move from higher education to the nonprofit ministry sector. I thought I might do that maybe a little bit later in my career.
Hmm.
But as I went through the process, I fell in love with the ministry. And if people are familiar with, in Christian circles, Our Daily Bread Ministries is well known. It's got high brand recognition here in the States and around the world. We are primarily a Bible engagement ministry that help people grow deeper in the relationship with God through studying and understanding the Bible. We're known for our devotional, but we provide a wide spectrum of material that we do and translate into a variety of different languages. And we, like you said at the beginning, we work in over 150 countries, 58 languages. We have 700 employees around the world. Most of them are outside the United States, not inside the United States. 33 offices. So it's a very different global ministry, one that I'm passionate about. Things that we focus on here are things that were in me that I was really interested in. And as I applied for it, I could see my background in both literature as a young man, things that I was passionate about, as well as the training in higher education, how they were coming together for this role. But I wasn't sure that the ministry would see it. I just didn't think that they would see someone coming from higher education would fit here. But yeah, it was an interesting process, and yeah, so a little over 2.5 years now in this role.
And that's how we met.
Yeah,
I've been devouring our daily our daily bread for about 2-3 years now. Read it every morning along with some Bible verses. I'm actually reading the Bible cover to cover. I've got a group of men that we're doing that with, and we meet once a week, but we have our daily readings. And it's so funny. I received one of your mailings, and Matt Lucas, wow, this is cool. I want to reach out to you, and that's kind of how we got connected. And just love your work. But tell us, beyond kind of the daily devotionals, what are some of the other ministries that ODB does, and some of the other publications that you folks do?
so yeah, so it's a great question. We're a multimedia production company. We do about $80 million in global revenue. A lot of it through fundraising, but also through several other entities that generate revenue. We have a small publishing house of about $5.5 million in revenue that we do. So we do the devotional, which we're known for, Our Daily Bread, and we do a suite of other material that supports that. That's for sale or for free that we give away. We also work in pastoral training. So we have an organization or a group called Our Daily Bread University, which really trains up the next generation of pastors in the developing world. 95% of pastors in the developing world have little to no theological training. So we're providing that. We work in the next generation called Reclaim Today, primarily here in the United States, but we have other similar outreaches in other countries that really is focusing on the day-to-day engagement, but for Gen Z and millennials. We also have a literacy program, which we're teaching people how to read with the goal to help them read scripture and to grow in their faith. And we're doing that primarily right now in Africa. We do multimedia production. We do full feature-length films. We just did a film called Juneteenth, which is an exploration of the recent recognition of the federal holiday.
Yeah.
And we tell it from a biblical perspective about really what are the underpinning beliefs and assumptions that the first people who celebrated that, the freed slaves in Texas, why they were celebrating that and how they saw that from a biblical perspective.
Huh.
Yeah, and then a broad selection of other material from the Immersed Bible to other content to help people grow in their faith and deeper Bible studies. So, yeah, going to our website right now is really not a good way to see us. We're redoing that so we can really tell the whole story of the ministry. But yeah, we do a broad selection of content and material to help people grow in their faith.
I love it. And 700 employees. And how many countries, Matt?
We have employees in 33 countries, and we serve. We say 100 and almost 160, but we recently need to update that. We're probably now in about 200 countries where we're actually actively working.
Very few that you aren't. How about
Yes,
that?
very few.
And in workplace culture, that's a challenge. And if you're a domestic business, particularly if you're maybe more than one office, how do you do that across such a broad geography with so much diversity with your employee base?
Well, my predecessor, one of the challenges I've had is I'm the first non-family member to lead the ministry.
Yeah.
But my predecessor, Rick DeHaan, has done a great job of laying the groundwork for creating a culture that works across the entire ministry. But you can imagine, as anybody who's on this, listens to this, who works with a global ministry, we got offices in almost every time zone. We got cultural barriers, we got language barriers. So yeah, it does make a challenge. We've agreed to, as a ministry, to really gather around some core principles. So our statement of faith, we have what's called an interdependence document, which outlines how we are to work together. That's something we come back to a lot and talk about. There's a lot of travel on my part of just getting out there and being present. And then we have our organizational structure done in such a way that our executive leadership team isn't just a U.S. team, but it's a global team. So we have representatives who are leading for the regions. And of course, we have office leaders who are representative on the ground. And then we have board structure that is a global board, but each of our country offices have their own board that ensures compliance with laws and regulations within the country.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure you're in some countries where, Christianity isn't the dominant religion, and there could be some, issues there as it relates to kind of how you're viewed. Has that been an issue from time to time, and particularly some of the more Muslim-oriented countries or others that maybe don't, comply with our beliefs as closely as we do?
Yeah, no, definitely there is those challenges. We're in Sri Lanka, which is a national Buddhist country. So Buddhism is the nationally recognized religion. Less than 2 or 3% of the population are Christian. So that's one area that's a real challenge that most people don't think about. We're also working in India. We have an office there, and so that has the Hindu, the focus that the current president there on Hinduism has created some challenges for us, and so always being sensitive. We have a big office in Indonesia, which is the largest Muslim country in the world. And then we have some places that are we don't talk about very publicly just because of the wanting to be sensitive to the culture and the politics. I think what's worked for us is that we hire all national people. So the Sri Lankan office is run by Sri Lankans, which helps with the contextualization and the sensitivity being, operating in those countries.
Yeah, got it. Tell us a little bit about your daily routine, Matt. What do you do to make sure you keep your walk on Christ's path and the wonderful kingdom building that your organization does? Do you have your daily devotionals and things that you do to reach out and, keep you on the path, so to speak?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we talk about that a lot here in the ministry, that if we're about Bible engagement and we don't practice what we profess, that would be a problem. So, I have my own time with God, reading His Word, prayer, reflection. I use a variety of different things, including our own material. I always make sure that I use our own material, which is a broad selection of material. Right. One of the things that in this role that I've found myself doing more, I usually a couple times a week, I'll go on a prayer walk where I just spend some time reflecting and praying to God and just reflecting on challenges that I'm seeing in the ministry and really trying to wait and hear what would be the right step to take. So just a lot of dialogue. And that walking, I can usually go for an hour and a half of just meditatively reflecting on the day, the week, the challenges I'm facing. Usually if I'm facing a major issue, my wife will know that I'm going to, go out for a long walk. And that usually begins just this reflection on me, like where I might be part of the problem, or are there things, blind spots that I'm not, that I need to be seeing in my own life that will help me better respond to the challenges we're facing.
Yeah. How do you do recruiting? What do you look for when you're hiring people, particularly, say, at the executive level and folks that directly report to you?
Yeah, again, I think I've been blessed with a really strong HR team that's really thought a lot about recruitment, and they've done a great job in that area over the years. So we've got a pretty well-oiled machine about how we want to look for somebody and what we do. So, like every organization, we have our own grid that we look at, but we also have used a broad selection of recruiting firms and others to help us identify key people. What I'm looking for is really a couple of key areas. One, I'm looking for teachability. For me, that's been what I have found when I've not been successful in leading somebody. It's usually their lack of teachability. So that's one. Related to that is how quickly someone seeks forgiveness. So usually in an interview question, I'm usually asking not just about a time where they have made a mistake, but more importantly is how have you rectified that mistake? What have you done to make it right? And I'm usually looking for someone to be able to say, yeah, I've had to go seek forgiveness. I've had to make something right. And that's hard to talk about. Yeah. It's hard to practice. But for me, that's a key component.
It's what we're asked to do.
Yeah, definitely.
And also forgive others too.
Yeah, definitely.
Both sides of that coin. Yeah.
So talk about that a lot. So I'm usually looking for people that, are teachable, are quick to seek forgiveness, who have been quick to forgive when they've wronged others, and to be able to demonstrate that. So those, like every CEO, you're looking for that experience, for the right match, the right chemistry, looking for character. But I've found that those two pieces, teachability and the quickness to forgive, if I got those other pieces, if I can get those two pieces in there, assuming that the other qualities are there, those are the defining characteristics for me.
Right. Love it. Well, Matt, we're just about out of time, but we always have one last question we always ask our CEO guests, and that's, what kind of career and life advice would you give to someone who maybe has their eyes on their own corner office someday?
Yeah, I've had a number of people ask me that question, and my advice would probably be, don't look for it. And that's probably been a little too much about my own story, because I wasn't looking for it all along. But as I moved through the opportunities that God provided for me, it was finding the right mentor and being teachable in those moments so that you could grow to the next opportunity. I'd say don't look for it, but as you're given the opportunity, bring the right people along with you to help them speak into that, speak into areas that you need growth in, and that would probably be the advice I'd give.
Wise advice, wise counsel. Matt Lucas has had the privilege and honor to serve as a leader in Christian higher education for 14 years and now serves as CEO and president of Our Daily Bread, a growing Christian ministry with a global mission and reach. Matt Lucas, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Yeah, thanks, Brant, and thanks for the work that you're doing with ROI, and really appreciate your passion for helping develop and share what's going on with mid-level CEOs. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.